My name's Nat. We are going to do a really interesting session on hidden disabilities, neurodiversity, and culture. Probably not surprising, but pop culture hasn't treated neurodivergence well. We're going to be looking at some examples, how we might improve. While today we are predominantly focusing on things like dyslexia, dyspraxia, autism, and ADHD, essentially we're talking about the brain. The brain, everyone thinks differently. Most people have a brain. And as a result, hopefully this will all come together very nicely. If you want to know who am I, why am I talking? My name's Nat, and basically I'm a specialist in the brain. I talk about it all day long. I also have dyslexia, dyspraxia, and autism. And we are going to be talking about, are these labels important? How do we represent them? How do we talk about them? Hot off the press, I've just got my master's certificate in neuroscience framed. This frame cost me £2 from Wilco. Considering I'm in years of debt for the degree, I think it was worth it. We've got our lovely team here. We've got myself today, and we also have Jess in the chat as well, who's going to be joining us. In terms of us, 80% of our team are neurodivergent, so we're experts via experience. We're a nice little team. We offer free support and training. The subject today is neurodiversity and cultural perspective. It's a bit of a big one. We're going to be looking at cultural and ethnic background influences, portrayal of discussion. If you have no idea what neurodiversity is or still new on the understanding, do not worry, we are going to be breaking it apart. In essence, it's the diversity of thought. If you have these amount of characteristics, we like to package them up and stick a label on them. Right or wrong, that's why you do it. That's how the brain thinks. And if you think in a certain way, that is when you might be called something or another. I want to know, before I get started, how familiar are you all with the concept of neurodiversity? Either super familiar, not very familiar, a little bit. Neurodiversity is the norm. If anyone thinks neurodiversity is positive, negative, it's not. It's just a neutral word. Essentially, neuro, as in brain, diversity, we're all different. This image I always like to use to help everyone really understand what it is. We talked about neuro being neural pathways, how our brains connects the dots, makes information flow, and diversity just means we're all different. Diversity is just the biological fact that human beings have brains and none of our brains are the same. If you see all these pinky brains, they are just as good as the colourful brains. However, there's more of them. Because there's more of them, as a society, we develop for the majority. As such, they would be called typical, neurotypical. If you have a neurotypical brain, doesn't mean you're special. It just means that your brain is the dominant brain in terms of why we decided to create things. All these other different colored brains, it shows you that there are lots of different ways that we group ideas together. As an individual, I am not diverse. A person can't be diverse. But a collective, a group can. One person, that is when I would be called neurodivergent. Hopefully you're getting this terminology. The umbrella term is neurodiversity. Below that, neurodiverse as the group. And as an individual, neurodiverse. You can be neurodivergent and have dyslexia. You can be neurodivergent and have autism. You could be neurodivergent and have ADHD. You don't have to have a diagnosis. You can still have a brain that thinks differently without a diagnosis. But what makes neurodiversity different from just talking about disability? Disability is outdated now. It's not just a new coat of paint when we talk about neuro. They have completely different meanings. The medical model is conditions like schizophrenia, dyslexia, dyspraxia, Crohn's, any sort of medical condition. This is the rest of society saying, hey, you've got a problem, you should fix it. That's not really that empowering. Where the social model, which neurodiversity would come out with, saying, hey, you're fine, you're beautiful just the way you are. Society is the problem. They create boundaries, which makes our life more difficult. Depending on what model, and different cultures and different societies will use different models. In the UK, where I'm from, we use a combination of both, but we are starting to move from medical to social. However, a lot of countries will still use the medical model. It's worth thinking about whether or not you see being neurodivergent as a disability or a difference. Honestly depends on your background and where you come from. You're not going to get any concrete answers out of me today, which is annoying but true. If you thought, how do I know if I'm neurodivergent? It sounds like we're all a little bit unique, but it's not necessarily about how unique you are. It's about how easy you integrate with day-to-day life. Look at this lovely little diagram. I call it the spiky profile. On the bottom, we've got natural skills. These are the skills you're born with, easy, nice and inherently. On the left-hand side, you've got how easy or difficult it is. Let's start off with this faint pink line in the background. This is the neurotypical line. This is the average person. You're probably all right at reading. Why not? Coming up with ideas? Probably not too shabby. Speaking with people? It's all right. You're more of an all-rounder, more of a generalist. Of course, there are going to be things you find easy and difficult, but that margin is going to be within a certain amount. So you'll probably find day-to-day life easier enough. Whereas if you're neurodivergent, you are going to be much more spiky. You're going to have a much bigger fluctuation of ability. You might find reading really difficult, but you might be amazing innovative thinking. Public communication, but coming up with new ideas or being able to be very empathetic, you might be amazing. We're not talking about disabilities here. We are talking about the variation in terms of how the mind functions, how easy to how difficult something. If you have a big gap between one and the other, that, my friend, is neurodivergent. Let's look at ADHD and autism, which is part of the medical model. I want to know, what do you see these as? Do you see them as disorders, as differences, unique strengths, diverse learning styles? I want to know, what is your personal opinion and outlook on these? You'll probably realize these are very different. What we got here, we've got a lot of you developmental variations, we've got some of you in different, and we've got some unique strengths. Naturally, depending on where you're from, your personal background, race, religion, all these things. For instance, if you're someone who is a carer for someone with autism who is not able to live independently and non-verbal, you very well might see that as a disorder because it's difficult. But if you're someone like Elon Musk, richest person ever, you'll probably see it as a strength being autistic, which he is. If you're a scientist, you might see it more of a neurodevelopmental condition. If you are a teacher, you might just see it as a diverse learning style. It really depends where you're coming from. In terms of cultural perspectives on neurodiversity, the way we see different ways our brain works, being positive, negative, really depends on so many different factors. We've got a varied understanding. Different cultures have different views. Some cultures have not even a word for neurodiversity. It doesn't even translate. Others, it's common practice. I would say the UK and Europe are pretty good on it, on the whole. America, where are they? They're taking their time to understand it. No offense if any of you are. Some ADHD and autism disorders are seen as disordered. Others are different. Some people will say, boo, we need to cure it, get rid of it. Other people will say, hey, I'm a valuable asset to society. We've got different influences and perceptions. On here, just as an example, we say autism spectrum disorder, but it's gone by many different names in the past. Autistic disorder, Asperger's. I'm sure a lot of you have heard of the term, and guess what? It doesn't exist anymore. In team, they got rid of the label. So now ASD is the only diagnostic term. That being said though, if you are an individual who resonates or were diagnosed with Asperger's, you still have it. It's just not how we talk about autism going forward. Talking about how we might talk about autism if we're not going to use the term Asperger, I want to know, how do you personally talk about it? If you saw a direct translation of autism, which one would you choose? I want you to put a little pin on whichever one you would personally use. Just so we know, this is a safe place. There isn't no right or wrong answer. It's an individual basis. All of these names, while technically correct, they different. Let's say living with autism. It makes autism sound like it's your roommate. How you doing, autism? That's fine. But you don't just live with autism. Autism is with you wherever you go. Suffer from autism. It sounds like someone just stabbed me or I'm dying. Autism isn't cancer. It's not something that is robbing me every day of my life. But when people say suffering from autism, I do cringe a lot. If you say on the spectrum, which a lot of you have, it makes me sound like I'm surfing or if I'm riding something, like, whoa, on the spectrum, man. I guess that's fine. But sometimes people think the spectrum is linear, either here or here. You're on a high functioning, low functioning. Autism's not like that at all. Autism is three-dimensional. It can be all over. I guess it's fine. Then you've got the two most common, a person with autism and an autistic person. Interestingly, when I ask people who do not have autism, what do they prefer? They always say a person with autism. When I ask people who are autistic, typically they'll say they're an autistic person. You might be like, Nat, tomato, tomato, they are the exact same thing. No, they have different meanings to what it means for that person. If you're a person with autism, autism sounds like a handbag. I've got autism, just going to put it down here. No more have autism. What it is saying is, hey, I am a person. Autism does not define me. Yes, I have it, but it's not something which is me. I am my own person. On the flip side, an autistic person is saying, hey, I am autistic. It's part of my DNA. I can't stop being autistic. I can't put the autism down and decide I no longer want it. If you were to take the autism away from me, I wouldn't be me anymore. You can see here, words have power and they do have meaning. The words you use could tell you how the person sees it. If they say autistic, you might think they're really proud to be autistic. If they're a person with autism, they might be wanting to let you know that, hey, there's more to my identity than just the way that my brain. In terms of how we depict traits as well, that differs dramatically. If I was to ask you all, what is dyslexia? Dyslexia, isn't it just about reading? Dyspraxia, isn't that just about coordination? Autism, doesn't that mean you can't talk to people? ADHD, doesn't that just mean you have high attention? No. These are the stereotypes. Like most things, it's an iceberg. With dyslexia, for example, yes, reading is a big part of it. It doesn't mean you can't read, but it means the way you read is very different. For instance, people with dyslexia also struggle with attention, visual processing, emotional impact, processing, memory recall, memory retention. For me, who has dyslexia, reading is barely an issue. For me, it's more about memory and retrieval and being able to multitask at the same time. For instance, if I'm reading, I'm not comprehending. If I'm listening, I am also comprehending. I know my learning styles. When you look at media, if you hear dyslexia, it's always someone who can't read. People with dyslexia can read. Or if it's ADHD, it's always like, nope, there's more to it. Autism, they're having breakdowns every 5 seconds. These stereotypes are damaging. Hopefully you know that already. Let's look at how we represent autism. And this depends dramatically on culture. I want to do a little pin on what logo you think best represents autism. The autism piece has become incredibly controversial. Then you've got the infinity loop, which is often used for autism. This represents the spectrum. The rainbow, which is, again, similar to representing the spectrum. However, is often confused with LGBT. In the coloured rhythm, they do use yellow, but that can often get confused with cancer awareness. You don't want that baggage. What we use is, it depends. These are things which are worth taking into consideration. In some cultures, in some pockets of communities, the puzzle piece is fine. There are many charities that still use the puzzle piece. It depends how many feathers you want to ruffle. Share an example of a neurodiverse character from a game or movie and your thoughts on their portrayal. Easier said than done. If you think there's a character who you think may have autism but isn't explicitly stated, that's okay. A good example is Sheldon from The Big Bang Theory. Clearly autistic, but he's not ever mentioned it within the show. Bugsy, no, potentially. You always get him run over. The guy from Rayman, absolutely. In terms of positive or negative, on one hand, it got people talking about autism. On the other one, they think we're all geniuses. No, I wish. Ross, nice. John Durain from Scrubs, yeah. Eloise from Francis and Bridgerton, yeah. There are representation. Abed from Community, that's a good one. You really got to have to look for them. And what you'll find is most of these representations are very one-dimensional. They don't really show you much more apart from a quick look. These representations will quite often be the first time people have ever had exposure to some of these conditions. Cloud from Final Fantasy VII Remake shows difficult interactions with the party and social cues. Nice. Monk, definitely, particularly with OCD. Sean from The Good Doctor, yeah. Mr. Bean. Can see Mr. Bean. But you've got to ask yourself, why do you think they have autism? Is that a stereotype or a generalization? We talked about Rayman here, and we've got different ways that it is represented depending on your culture. In the Western world, autism is depicted normally in one or two ways. On one, they're normally done as exceptional geniuses. Whoa, this person's amazing. They see us like a superpower. Or they see us as severely disabled, completely unable to do the most basic things in society. We're always depicted as single, always depicted as nerdy. These aren't great representation. But if we look at the Eastern world, where are the representation? They are hardly ever shown. And if they are heavily stigmatized. We are getting Eastern games and they'll be translated for a Western audience. There's not always going to be a very nice lineup how we want to be showing things going forward. But in terms of our understanding of it, where does it come from? It comes from diagnostic guides, and these are Western documentation. Some of you would have heard of the ICD-11. This is like the manual, the Bible of understanding mental disorders. Or if any of you are in other countries outside of Europe, or maybe America, you might have heard of the DSM, the Statistical Manual of Mental Health Disorders. These are like the go-to book. Do you have something? Do you not have it? Is it positive? Is it negative? Let's face it, this book's pretty. However, this book doesn't take culture into consideration. This book is really binary. Do you have A, B, C? If you don't have it, you don't have it. If you do, you have nothing. But what happens if someone's not making eye contact? Maybe they have autism. In other cultures, particularly in the Eastern world, a child not making eye contact is considered polite. If you make eye contact with an elder, that's bad. You can see how in some countries, you would get a diagnosis of autism, and in other countries, you would not. But that doesn't sound like it's a real condition, does it? Another example is hearing voices. Some people would say schizophrenia. Other people would say, oh God, they've been blessed. It depends on the culture dramatically. If you are overly loud, you could be considered as ADHD, but for other people, it's considered confident. A lot of you think that these booklets should take cultural aspects into consideration. Yeah, I do too. But because that isn't the case, we do run into a lot of issues. You could see how this could easily get out of hand, or how you could misrepresent something. If we take a little look at race, here's some really interesting stats that are actually quite scary. In UK data, there is a higher psychiatric admission than when you go to, say, a mental health hospital. It's like African and Caribbean men. Are African and Caribbean men more likely to have a mental health disorder or psychosis? No. But a Western audience looking at these different cultures in terms of how they behave will see these characteristics. So they're getting misdiagnosed. In other cultures, autism is about 1 in 100 in the UK. Out in parts of Africa, it's 1 in 1,000. Why do we have more autistic people than some places in Africa? It's not because we have more people who are autistic. We are more likely to diagnose someone. We have more professionals, more awareness in that area. There's often concerns about overdiagnosis due to cultural misunderstandings. We need to recognize humanity in cultural context. Culture is definitely something which current psychiatry does not take into consideration much. And looking at nuances. I spoke a little bit about the DSM. This is how we diagnose people, mostly in America, but in other countries. You'll look that only a few years ago, we used to call autism schizophrenia. You wouldn't want that. Then it changed infantile autism. It only affected children. Every kind of generational gap, we are getting new ideas of what a condition is. Then people do not update their knowledge. A lot of people think autism is something, and then that's why we have a disconnect between generations. In the DSM, if you go on the second edition, which was 1968, being gay was a disorder. You were mentally unwell if you were gay. To most of us now, that's ridiculous. What the hell were they thinking? That wasn't that long ago. You see that our understandings do change. This is only a guide from a Western perspective. A lot of our countries don't have their own diagnostic manual, so they often rely on outdated ones. Moving a little bit back in terms of what is the right approach, because while I've talked a lot about the Western approach arguably being more developed than, say, the Eastern route, that's actually not true. There are many instances where an Eastern approach is actually a lot better than the Western approach. We've got to be careful not to put kind of unconscious hierarchy of what we think is the right way, just because maybe our terminology might be a little bit more progressive. It doesn't mean that our methods are more progressive. On here, I want you to rank what do you think is the key reason why left industrial nations actually have a higher recovery rate when it comes to mental health disorders. Big difference here between mental health and neurodivergent, but you can still recover as a neurodivergent person in terms of being able to overcome the mental health challenges that often come along with. And I found this really fascinating while researching it. Why do us as a Western nations have really low recovery rates? Some of the reasons could be countries in more rural areas to have stronger support and family networks. Other cultures take family way more important than we do. The second I was 18, I was like, bye mum. But other countries will stay with the elders and look after them forever. We've also got healing rituals. Why you say I don't believe in these rituals? They do foster hope, and they do make people feel like things can get better. It does have a stronger sense of community. And then with work nature, I thought this one would be like, because it's a little bit difficult to explain, or at least I found it. What it is saying is, because we work very 9-to-5 job, very office-based, we don't have a very good work-life balance. where countries where the jobs are a little bit more flexible, let's say farming, in terms of you pick your times within reason. It isn't normally your own boss. I appreciate that's not always the case, but quite often they have less structure than the Western world. And our structure often increases the likelihood of poor mental health and slow recovery. So the key takeaways from this session, and I hope you enjoyed, is to value neurodiversity. This isn't something which is bad nor good, but it is something which is neutral. Actually, there is a lot of good to be had from it. And understanding it just makes for a more interesting world. Cultural sensitivities, we do need to adapt to accept cultural norms. Remember the eye contact. If you were, say, I don't know, writing up about a person not making eye contact, doesn't mean they have autism. It could be more related to their culture and that what's considered respectful or not respectful. Positive portrayal, I'm completely fine with you making, say, the odd joke. I think we shouldn't hinder comedy, but what we should always do is show a balanced view. Make a joke that someone's easily distracted, but also show that hyper-focused and an absolute boss in other areas. Show a more well-rounded approach. In a nutshell, people typically learn in one or two ways. You've got the top-down approach, which is when you're the big picture thinker, and then you see the overall message, and then you get more narrower. Then you've got the bottom-up approach, which is when you start with the real tiny details and then work your way out. Those two normally clash, and as a society, we typically look at top-down. If any of you thought, hey Nat, this was really interesting, I'd love to learn more, we've got lots of references here, and this is being recorded. You can check it out later, but it has been fully critiqued. If you thought they was interesting, I actually create webinars every single week on every subject possibly imaginable. I've done a whole series on neurodiversity and pop culture. If you're interested to learn about how different conditions have been represented in media, check them out. Exceptional individuals, we've got ADHD in pop culture, neurodiversity in anime, and I think that's really interesting because Japan does have a lack of awareness of neurodiversity. However, a lot of their characters are very stereotypical. Do check them out. Here's our standard YouTube page, and you can see lots of webinars. You can search for pop culture, and you'll see loads of ones which are really interesting to talk about how it's represented. Also, neuro. I wish I had more time to talk about, but there are so many examples of how people are perpetuating outdated views. The whole idea that we only use 10% of our brain, false. The whole idea that women can't have autism, false. The whole idea that we're either a left brain or a right brain thinker, false. There are so many neuromyths, but again, maybe for another day. Here's the contact details. If you want to get in contact, you can just go to Exceptional Individuals. I've got characteristic quizzes. If you want to send me an email, it's just nat@exceptionalindividuals. If you want to add me on LinkedIn, here's a little QR code. I think our Instagram is the exact same one. I think it's exceptional_IND, but I didn't put it on there. Feel free to check it out. We are done, everyone. I hope you found that really useful, insightful, got a couple of gems out of it.